What if a forgotten planet at the edge of the galaxy, our Earth, became the spark that shattered a brutal empire? What if the most feared warlord in the stars made one fatal mistake, underestimating humanity? In a universe ruled by power and pride, a small blue world rose from the ashes to defy the impossible. This isn't just a story about war, it's a story about spirit, survival, and the kind of courage that even the stars couldn't ignore. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and show a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's dive into this unforgettable journey. The great dome of the Galactic Union shimmered above a city of floating towers, its interior filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Tension crackled in the air like static. Nirel, a tall, gray-skinned envoy with years of peacekeeping under her belt, stood at the center of the room. Her eyes scanned the chamber, landing briefly on each diplomat before she spoke. "We must act now. Kraden is preparing to strike." Gasps and murmurs echoed throughout the Union. Kraden of Starnox was no ordinary warlord. He was a storm that moved from system to system, turning planets into ash and calling it conquest. Until now, his focus had been on fractured planets with no allies. But his attention had shifted toward a small, quiet world called Earth. Most members in the chamber had only heard of Earth in passing, a blue planet tucked away in a distant arm of the galaxy. Technologically behind, politically fragmented, a place still learning how to reach beyond its own atmosphere. But to Nirel, and a handful of others, Earth was not something to ignore. At the back of the room, a young analyst named Saro tapped nervously on his tablet. He had studied Earth for the past year, fascinated by their unpredictable history. In less than 100 years, humans had gone from primitive radio signals to exploring neighboring planets. They had survived wars, rebuilt after disasters, and even started experimenting with artificial intelligence. Their creativity was strange and chaotic, but effective. Saro had warned his superiors weeks ago. Kraden wouldn't find Earth easy prey. Kraden sees Earth as weak, Nirel continued. But he is wrong. If he attacks, it won't be another victory. It could ignite something we can't control. The council leader, a slow-speaking diplomat from the moon world Elhiri, frowned. They are still a young species, their weapons are crude. Why would Kraden bother? Because Earth resists, Nirel answered simply. And because Kraden fears what he doesn't understand. Across the galaxy, on a blackened planet ringed by smoke, Kraden stood inside a fortress carved into a mountain. His armor clinked as he paced in front of a holomap showing Earth's rotation. He had crushed dozens of worlds before breakfast. Earth would be no different, he believed. A messenger entered the war room, bowing low. "A delegation from the Union requests an audience, my lord," Kraden growled. He expected this. The Union always came with their peace talks and polite warnings. But Kraden didn't fear words. He only respected power. "Let them speak. I enjoy watching hope die." Back at the Union headquarters, Nirel was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission, joined by military advisors and translators. Saro was added to the team for his knowledge of Earth. As their ship left the Council's spaceport, Saro stared out at the stars, stomach twisting. He hoped Kraden would listen. He doubted it. When they arrived on Starnox, Kraden's capital, the skies were dim and heavy. Towers made of black stone rose like jagged teeth from the ground. The delegation was met by armed soldiers with smooth helmets and glowing rifles. They said nothing, just led the visitors through shadowed halls filled with trophies, skulls, burned flags, cracked weapons from defeated civilizations. Inside the throne room, Kraden sat on a chair of fused metal and bone. He was enormous, taller than any being Nirel had ever met, his voice like distant thunder. "You came to speak for Earth?" he asked, the word sounding like a joke on his tongue. Nirel stood tall. "We come to warn you," Kraden laughed, a sound that made the walls vibrate. "Warn me? Of what? A planet of farmers and machine worshippers?" "They're not what you think," Saro blurted out before he could stop himself. Kraden turned to him slowly, eyes narrowing. Saro cleared his throat. "They surprise people. They survive everything and they don't fight fair. They have nothing that can stop me, Creighton said, rising to his full height. Maybe not alone, Nyril said calmly, but they're not alone anymore. Others in this council will protect them. You'll turn the galaxy against yourself. Creighton stepped forward until he stood face to face with Nyril. Then let it burn. Earth is mine. The meeting ended. The delegation left in silence, their warnings ignored. Back aboard the ship, Nyril sent a brief message to the Union. He will not stop. Prepare the galaxy, as they flew back toward Chiu, neutral space. Sorrow watched the stars once again. But this time he didn't wonder if Creighton would attack. He knew he would. The question now was, would Earth be ready? In his fortress, Creighton stood alone before a large window, looking out into space. Let them resist, he whispered. It will only make the fire sweeter. And somewhere on Earth, far from the knowledge of this gathering storm, people looked up at the night sky, unaware that war was coming, and that soon their world would become the center of a battle that could change the galaxy forever. Their first sign of trouble appeared as a strange object near Jupiter, something enormous moving just beyond Earth's telescopes. At first, scientists believed it to be a rogue asteroid. But as the shape came into focus, fear spread. It wasn't a rock. It was a fleet. Creighton's fleet. Hundreds of alien ships, black and sharp like blades, had entered the solar system, and they were heading straight for Earth. In a hidden military base deep beneath the mountains of Asia, Commander Lysa Vale stood in front of a giant screen showing the alien fleet's path. She had trained her whole life for war, but this was something else. Earth had never seen anything like this before. Still, she remained calm, her sharp mind already forming plans. Lisa believed that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't firepower, it was human unpredictability. The world united quickly. Borders didn't matter anymore. Countries that once argued now worked side by side. A global defense council was formed and Lysa was named its leader. Across the planet, bases were activated, satellites repositioned, and defense systems powered up. It wasn't just military minds that joined the fight. Scientists, engineers, and even students began working together, racing against time to build what Earth would need to survive. One of those minds was Dr. Teven Murrell, a quirky but brilliant inventor from South Africa. He lived in a lab filled with gadgets that sparked and blinked, and most people thought he was eccentric. But Lysa knew his ideas, while strange, often worked. Teven had been developing a neural disruptor, a device that sent out low-frequency signals capable of scrambling enemy communication systems. It had never been tested on an alien species, but it was the best shot Earth had at breaking Creighton's control over his forces. Meanwhile, Major Quinn Harrow, a no-nonsense soldier with a gravelly voice and years of battlefield experience, began preparing ground troops. He knew a head-on fight would be suicide. Instead, he trained soldiers in guerrilla tactics, city defense, and surprise attacks. They've got the tech, Quinn told his teams, but we've got the spirit. We've survived everything this world could throw at us. This is just the next storm. Panic spread in some cities, but it didn't last long. Something incredible happened. People stopped being afraid and started preparing. From Europe to Africa, Asia to the Americas, everyone did their part. Mechanics welded armor to trucks, hackers built firewalls to defend global networks, and pilots trained in simulators that mimicked alien ships. Civilians dug trenches and built barricades in city streets. They were not ready for war, but they refused to roll over and die. As Creighton's fleet grew closer, Earth's telescopes picked up their details. Each ship was shaped like an arrowhead, covered in dark plating and glowing red lines. They blocked out the stars as they moved. On the ground, the skies were filled with strange lights as the planet's defense systems activated. Orbital satellites powered up railguns and EMP cannons. Everything was in place. All that was left was to wait. On the eve of the invasion, Commander Lysa stood on a cliff overlooking a massive valley filled with mobile units and defense gear. She held a small communicator in her hand and spoke to the world. "We've faced plagues, disasters, and our own worst impulses," she said. But we always rise. Tonight, we stand not as nations, but as one people. Let them come. We're ready. Then the sky broke. The first wave of Creighton's ships entered Earth's upper atmosphere like falling stars. But instead of flames, they brought darkness. Giant crafts hovered over major cities, New York, Shanghai, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, casting shadows that stretched for miles. Alien drones began descending, scanning, and preparing to clear landing zones. That's when Earth struck back. Lysa gave the command. All across the globe, the neural disruptors powered on. A low pulse filled the air, inaudible to humans, but devastating to Creighton soldiers. Their helmets sparked. Communications went silent. Troops began stumbling, confused and uncoordinated. It was working. Major Quinn's forces didn't wait. In the confusion, they launched the counterattack. Small squads using speed and surprise hit alien patrols, using smoke bombs, electromagnetic pulses, and even clever traps made from old city ruins. The invaders had better weapons, but Earth's fighters had better timing and local knowledge. In Johannesburg, a group of teenagers hacked into a downed alien drone and reprogrammed it to fight for them. In Tokyo, a retired engineer activated a homemade signal jammer that shut down an entire alien strike squad. All over the world, Earth didn't just resist, it stunned the galaxy. From his throne ship, Creighton watched in disbelief as his well-trained army began to falter. "How are they doing this?" he growled, slamming a metal fist on his command console. His advisors had no answer. Nothing in their files prepared them for this kind of resistance. The humans weren't following any known patterns. They weren't behaving like prey. They were fighting like something far more dangerous. In the command center, Lysa stared at the screen. Red dots marked enemy units. Blue dots marked her own. At first, the map was nearly covered in red. But now blue was holding its ground and even pushing forward in some areas. Her plan was working. Still, she knew the war had only just begun. Creighton had yet to reveal his full hand. Earth's early success was important, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a fight that would decide their place in the stars. Lysa turned to her team, her voice steady. "We've shaken them," she said. "Now let's make sure they never forget who we are." The sound of battle filled the skies. Smoke rose from cities across the globe, and the once bright heavens were now clouded with the massive shapes of alien ships. Earth's people had struck hard and fast, surprising Creighton's forces with clever tactics and stubborn resistance. But now, the real test had begun. The enemy had recovered from the initial shock. They were regrouping, adapting, and pressing forward with terrifying force. Earth was holding on, but just barely. At the center of the chaos, a bold plan was taking shape. Commander Lysa Vale knew that holding the ground was no longer enough. If Earth was to survive, they needed to cut the head off the serpent. Creighton's command ship, the largest vessel in his fleet, hovered like a dark moon over the Atlantic Ocean. It was from this floating fortress that Creighton controlled his army. If they could strike at that ship, maybe, just maybe, they could end this invasion before Earth was torn apart. To lead the mission, Lysa chose Captain Rin Jace, a skilled leader known for staying calm under pressure. Rin wasn't the biggest or the loudest, but his mind was sharp and his courage unshakable. His team included some of the best soldiers Earth had left, including Specialist Kale Strun, an expert in stealth operations and sabotage. Kale didn't talk much, but everyone trusted him to get the job done. Joining them was Leah Devons, a former pilot who could fly anything with wings or without. As the team prepared for launch, Lysa spoke to them directly. "This isn't just a mission," she said. "This is a chance to end the war. You're not just carrying our hopes, you're carrying Earth's future. Come back alive, but if you can't, make it count." Their ship, a small but heavily shielded craft, launched under cover of night. The skies above were still swarming with alien fighters, but Earth's forces created a diversion to draw them away. Rin's team flew low across the ocean, using the water to hide their approach. They slipped past the outer defenses, dodging plasma fire and scanning beams, and managed to land on the underbelly of Creighton's command ship. The interior of the ship was vast and quiet, filled with smooth walls, humming lights, and strange, alien technology. Rin led the way, his boots making soft thuds against the floor. Kyle moved ahead, disabling traps and cutting into control panels to open doors. Leah kept a map on her screen, tracking their path toward the ship's command center. Every hallway they passed felt colder, every sound sharper. The deeper they went, the more it felt like they were walking into the heart of a storm. Back on Earth, the battle was growing more intense. Cities were burning and alien machines marched through the streets. But still, the people fought. Soldiers and civilians worked side by side, defending every block, every rooftop, every piece of ground. General Lysa watched it all unfold from her command center, her eyes fixed on both the battle maps and the blinking light that marked Rin's team inside Creighton's ship. "Hold the line," she whispered. "Just hold the line." Inside the alien ship, the strike team finally reached the outer door of the command center. It was guarded by Creighton's elite warriors, towering figures with armor that shimmered like steel smoke. The fight was brutal. Plasma blasts lit up the dark corridors. Kyle moved like a ghost, weaving through shadows and striking from behind. Leah covered their backs, firing quick bursts to keep the enemy pinned. Rin moved forward with steady steps, leading his team like a silent storm. They broke through. The command center was a massive chamber, with tall walls that glowed with alien symbols. At the far end stood Creighton himself. He turned slowly as they entered, his eyes glowing with cold fire. "So this is humanity's best," he said. "A handful of insects crawling into my nest." He drew a long weapon that buzzed with dark energy, its blade longer than a man was tall. Rin stepped forward. "We're not insects. We're the storm that's coming for you." The battle that followed was unlike anything Rin had ever faced. Creighton was fast, far faster than his size suggested. His strikes shook the ground, and his weapon melted steel. But the team didn't back down. They moved as one. Kyle darted, behind Creighton, planting charges on control consoles. Leah called out enemy movements and watched for openings. Rin kept Creighton's attention, dodging and striking, always one step from death. But slowly, the tide turned. Kale's charges exploded, throwing sparks and disabling Creighton's control systems. Leah fired a shot that shattered part of Creighton's shoulder armor. Rin saw his chance. He rushed forward and delivered a final strike, using a weapon built with alien tech scavenged from earlier battles. The blade pierced Creighton's chest, and with a howl of fury, the warlord fell. The command center began to shake. Alarms blared in a language no one could understand. Rin shouted, "We need to get out now." The team ran back through the corridors, fighting off the last guards and diving onto their ship just as the command center collapsed behind them. The engines roared to life, and they blasted out into the night sky just as the great vessel began to fall from the clouds. From her command post, Lysa saw the flagship burning and crashing into the sea. A cheer erupted across the command room. Around the world, people looked up and saw fire falling from the sky. And for the first time since the war began, they knew they had a chance. Rin's voice crackled through the radio. "Target down. We're coming home." And Earth, wounded, scarred, but still standing, began to believe it could win. The skies above Earth were quiet again. For the first time in weeks, there were no alien ships hovering over cities, no sirens blaring, no bright flashes of weapons lighting up the clouds. The war was over. Creighton's command ship had fallen from the sky like a dying star, and with it, his invasion collapsed. All across the planet, people stepped out of shelters and bunkers, blinking in the sunlight. They saw ruins, yes, but also saw one another. Strangers hugged, neighbors wept, soldiers, many of them barely old enough to drink, looked around in disbelief. Somehow, Earth had survived. Commander Lysa Vale stood at the edge of a cliff watching, smoke drift across the horizon. Fires still burned in the distance, but they were fading. Teams were already working to put them out. She hadn't slept in 2 days, but her mind was clear. The worst had passed. But she knew this wasn't the end. It was something new, a moment when everything changed. Earth was no longer just a blue dot on a galactic map. It was a name that others would remember. A world that had stood up to the darkness and pushed back. In the heart of the capital city, a ceremony was held. It wasn't for celebration exactly. It was for remembrance. People gathered to honor those who had fallen. Rows of photographs lined the memorial square, showing the faces of those who had given everything. The names were read one by one. Not just soldiers, but engineers, doctors, even children who had acted with courage in the face of fear. As the yell, crowd stood in silence. A single ship descended from the sky. It carried a guest from far away. Stepping down from the ramp was Hera Talon, Earth's newly appointed ambassador to the Galactic Union. Her posture was straight, her uniform sharp, but her eyes were tired. She had spent the last week in orbit, speaking with representatives from the Union. Now she returned with news. At the front of the crowd, she met with Lisa and Captain Rin Jace, whose strike team had brought down Kraden's command ship. They didn't exchange many words. A nod was enough. Later that day, in a secure room beneath the rebuilt command center, Hera shared the Union's message. They want Earth at the table, she said. Not just as a guest, but as a member. A full member with a vote. Lysa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. They didn't care before, she said. Why now? Hera gave a small smile. Because we earned it, and because we scared them a little. Across the galaxy, Kraden's empire was falling apart. Without his leadership, the warlords he had once commanded turned on each other. His territory splintered into chaos. Some tried to claim his throne, but none had the same fearsome control. Amid the confusion, smaller planets began to rise, seizing freedom they hadn't known in years. In that vacuum, whispers began. Of Earth. Of the planet that had faced Kraden and won. Some feared it. Others wanted to ally with it. But no one ignored it anymore. Among the warlords still standing, one figure moved quietly in the shadows. His name was Orvek, one of Kraden's former generals. He had not joined the final invasion. He had watched from afar, studying Earth's defenses, noting their tactics. He wasn't like Kraden. He didn't believe in brute force, he believed in patience, and he believed Earth was dangerous. Not just because of its weapons, but because of its unpredictability. In a hidden chamber lit by red light, Orvek met with others like him. Kraden failed, he said, because he underestimated them. We won't make the same mistake. A new plan was forming, not of war, but of infiltration, deception, and control. Earth, Orvek believed, wouldn't be destroyed. It would be reshaped. Back on Earth, life was slowly returning to normal. Cities were being rebuilt, schools reopened, and power restored. But the people had changed. The world had changed. There was a unity now that hadn't existed before. Flags still flew, but under them was a shared understanding. They were one people now, survivors of the same fire. Lysa walked through one of the temporary camps, speaking with families, helping where she could. She didn't wear her uniform that day. She just wanted to be Lisa, one of them. Captain Rin, meanwhile, had turned down a medal. He said others deserved it more. He spent most of his time with his team, helping them recover, staying out of the spotlight. But when he was asked what he thought the future held, he gave a simple answer. The stars are watching us now. Let's give them something to remember. In the skies above, satellites picked up strange signals, faint, coded messages bouncing between hidden stations. Hera and her diplomatic team began preparing for new talks, new treaties, and likely new threats. But this time, Earth would not be walking in blind. They had earned their place. They had paid the cost. And in the quiet moments as children played among the rubble and flowers were laid on graves, there was a sense that something greater had begun. Earth had survived the storm, but now it echoed through the stars. And those echoes were only the beginning.